He's a delegate. He's a Republican from Virginia Beach. He's also a former Navy SEAL. He's also the author of the book that's just come out, Trust Betrayed. He's also a radio talk show host. He's got a lot going on. Now he's a columnist for National Review. I don't know how to keep up with this guy. Scott, great to have you, and thank you for sitting in for me on Friday. I heard you did a great job as always.
John, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you and the audience, of course. And, yeah, we had a great time. My big brother, Andy, was there, and we had a wonderful time.
Well, good deal. Okay. Your new column, Obama is playing a game of global chicken, this in townhall.com. And share with our audience, you were talking about the Yemeni situation. Give us an update on that.
Well, I just heard actually an email from Yemen late last night, which is, of course, today, last night for us, but today for Yemen. They just took over the air base that we evacuated our special forces and intelligence folks that were doing counterterrorism stuff from the south because the Houthis had ran it over. I mean, they took it over, and now they're pretty close to Aden, which is where the embattled president was hiding out. But from what I understand, he has fled his residence as well, too. So, but let me say that I don't think it's a coincidence that just after we evacuate every one of our intelligence and special forces folks, that the Houthis have a call to arms, that they take over that they say, all right, we take over Taiz, the third largest city, and they say they're going down south to get Hadi's forces. I think it was concession with the Iranian talks. And let me also say that there was a ship that docked in Yemen that gave tons of, from Iran, an Iranian ship that gave tons of weapons to the Houthis right around that time, too. So I don't think that's a coincidence.
So what you're alleging, Scott Taylor, if I understand it, is that we pulled out as part of a deal, a concession made to Iran for the negotiations.
You know, when you look at the Middle East, the United States foreign policy in the Middle East for decades has been balancing the regional powers of Iran and Saudi Arabia. Right now, you have a stronger Iran than since the Persian Empire. You see them controlling Iraq basically through their proxies. They're controlling Yemen through their proxy. They have more leverage in Lebanon and Syria as well as Libya. At the same time, our president is having crucial, critical, dangerous nuclear talks. And I do believe there's concessions given there for sure. So for short-term gain, we're going to have a huge problem for the long-term. General Petraeus just came out and said ISIS, as horrible as they are, Iran is the bigger threat long-term, and he's right.
But now what about the argument that Iran is actually we have a common enemy, both ourselves and Iraq and Iran and ISIS. So there's one school of thought that says, why not ally with them on that?
Well, you're absolutely right. There are some overlapping interests for sure. But we had the same thing with Russia, didn't we, in World War II? And then look what happened.
Right.
So the policy that's worked for decades to balance the Middle East amongst the powers is the one that is necessary. You know, Yemen can be very destabilized. It's already destabilized now, but if that spills over into Saudi Arabia, of course, Yemen is at the very bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, surrounded by the Red Sea on one side and the Persian Gulf on the other. And you see the Saudi Arabia is already amassing heavy equipment and troops on their porous southern border to stop that destabilization from coming over. Because if it happens in that region, you're talking about the world's oil trade. You're talking about trying to get an Iranian nuclear deal with giving concessions and negotiating from a position of weakness. You're looking at not only threatening American national security in the future, but also world energy security.
So, Scott, I want to get to the back to the Yemen situation. You know, it was not long ago that President Barack Obama was utilizing Yemen as basically a model for his diplomacy. What happened?
Well, you know, it's a pattern with this president. I mean, he does little things to show that he's doing something, but he's not proactive. And why I say that is when you look at Yemen, we had an embarrassing situation where our embassy was evacuated, and everybody's basically running for their lives to get to the airport. They lose all the trucks that are there. There's $500 million worth of weapons aid that's gone now, not accounted for. But the problem, or the huge issue is, the president knew about this. He knew that the Houthis were on the move almost a year before they came down into Sanaa and took over the state apparatus. But yet, we didn't do it. Nothing happened. He didn't have partners on the ground to do anything or help with folks. And now we had the embarrassing situation of evacuation of the embassy. And now, of course, we have no human intelligence or footprint that's in Yemen right now. You hear some folks pushing back and saying, well, we have satellite imagery and we can launch drone strikes somewhere else. That is simply not the same as having boots on the ground, and not the same boots on the ground that he talks about in Iraq, but having intelligence and human intelligence and developing sources and having special forces there with the capability to attack if necessary.
Okay, so Scott Taylor, how serious is the Yemeni situation? I mean,
it's extremely serious, John. Number one, the Houthis are of course Shia, and they're backed by Iran, but they're only a third of the population of Yemen. The rest of them are Sunni. Of course, you have Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, who are also Sunni. Al Qaeda's ranks will absolutely swell because just as we have a common enemy with Iran, those Sunni tribesmen will not accept the Houthi rule. They will align with Al Qaeda, and which will help Al Qaeda and strengthen Al Qaeda. And we know that AQAP, from the Obama administration, that is the biggest threat, Al Qaeda threat to our homeland. They've already launched attacks. They've planned attacks on Western interest and us as well too. So it's a serious problem, not only for that, but also for the destabilization of a region that has most of the world's energy trade.
So I'm going to play a clip that I want to get to the Benjamin Netanyahu apology tour, and I want to get your comments on that.
Today, Prime Minister Netanyahu met with a group of minority citizens, and he just put on his Facebook page just moments ago that he said, I know what I said a few days ago damaged Israel's Arabs. I had no intention of it. I'm sorry for that. I see myself as a Prime Minister of each and every one of you, all citizens of Israel, without any distinction of religion, race, and gender. Now, as you know, Wolf, the Prime Minister has tried to walk back those comments over the last several days, saying he wasn't talking about Arabs in particular, but was talking about a wider movement with money coming from the outside to unseat him. But Israel's Palestinians that have Israeli citizenship, 1.6 million, Wolf, who did very well in this election, came out in droves, actually they did very well in this election, the third biggest bloc in the Knesset now, very hurt by those comments, and now the Prime Minister trying to soften that blow and trying to say that he is sorry, Wolf.
Okay, so we've got basically an apology tour, but a lot of this, Scott, driven by the fact that how you can say what his involvement is, but there were about 100 former President Obama campaign operatives in Israel. They funneled all kinds of campaign money in there for the opposition. And, now Netanyahu forced to apologize and walk back campaign statements he made. What's the deal?
Well, I think it's pretty amazing that our president couldn't find time to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu when he was here in this country. And most of that was because he was saying that, well, I don't want to meet with him because it's too close to the election, and I don't want to give the impression that we're getting involved in a foreign election. So that's fantastical, of course, because his minions were over there and they were funding and going against Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, that being said, I think Benjamin Netanyahu's comments were abrasive. And, some of that's domestic political stuff. He was trying to get elected. He was in sort of a struggle for his political career. But I think that he was a little bit wrong for saying what he did, even if he meant something different. It was a poor choice of words.
Right, and now he has to figure out how to welcome them back, obviously.
Well, he actually had a lot of Arab support. Yeah. There were a lot of Arabs that came out and supported him. When you look at the breakdown of the elections over there,
how did he manage that after the statement he made?
Well, here's the deal: in the Middle East, and I spent years going back and forth to Yemen myself, and people respect and fear strength. That is why our president is not respected or feared in the Middle East. They respect and fear strength. That's what you negotiate from. That's what you project, and they will follow you. That's just a fact over there.
Let's go. We were talking earlier about the nuclear deal, Scott, with Iran. And now I've got Secretary of State John Kerry says, there's no nuclear deal now, but we're still making progress. But a lot of people like me and as you alleged to earlier, the perhaps concession deal being made, I just don't trust them.
Over the past months, the P5+1 have made substantial progress towards that fundamental goal, though important gaps remain. In London, we will share ideas this evening about how to resolve the remaining sticking points, as I did yesterday on the telephone with Foreign Minister Lavrov and Foreign Minister Wang Yi. We will coordinate our strategy as we have, as we approach the end of the March deadline, to reach an understanding on the major issues. And those of us meeting tonight will then return to our respective capitals for consultations before coming back to Lausanne next week to determine whether or not an agreement is possible. We don't want just any deal. If we had, we could have announced something a long time ago. And clearly, since the joint plan of action was agreed, we are not rushing. This has been a 2.5-year or more process.
Do you believe him?
I don't. Like I was talking about, where I believe it's not a coincidence with what happened in Yemen, and quite frankly, some also in Iraq as well as what's happening with Iran in Iraq. That wouldn't be a part, of course, of the talks with the P5. But I think it's quite telling that the French are holding the line on trying to stop Iran from having a bomb, more so than our folks. If you are enriching uranium for peaceful energy, you do it to 3 to 4%. When you have it for a bomb, it's like I think it's 70%, 72%, or something like that. They're around 20. What does that tell you? And look, I sat in General Sisi's, now President Sisi's office in Egypt on a delegation, and I asked him, well, what do you think about Iran? Are they getting the bomb? He said, of course they're getting the bomb. Of course they're trying to get the bomb. They're trying to be the regional power there in the area, which is going to destabilize and make out of balance the Middle East, and it's going to create an arms race. The Saudis have already said. And if you negotiate this deal and you say, no, you can't have 10,000 centrifuges to enrich, you can have 6,000. Well, that also means that you're saying to the world that any country can have that. That's the acceptable amount. That is extremely dangerous. And, we cannot allow Iran to get nuclear bombs, period. And I talk about my column. I don't know how much time we got, but I talk about using thorium as an element, which is also a proven fuel for nuclear. We actually proved it, but we didn't go with thorium because it's almost impossible to proliferate into bombs. But it's more efficient, it's more abundant in the Earth's surface, and there's zero chance for Fukushima meltdown. But we went with uranium because we wanted bombs in the 50s and 60s. We should bring that back, as India and China and Russia are starting to do now, actually, and we'll use that as a foreign policy tool. We'll call their bluff. We'll say, we have enriched uranium. We will help and finance a peaceful energy program for you. And the United States could have a huge boon in exporting services and products with thorium nuclear energy and use it as a foreign policy tool.
Well, they're not going to do that, Scott, because that would eliminate their ability to get a bomb. And there's one school of thought. I've only got a minute. I want to get your final comment. There's one school of thought that says, at the end of the day, President Obama believes that a nuclear-armed Iran would indeed be a counterbalance to Israel and would actually stabilize the area.
I think that is extremely naive. If you have 5,000 nuclear bombs or if you have one, you have a seat at the table. Look at North Korea. We have to deal with those guys constantly because they're nuclear. We have nuclear bombs. It is going to be a complete out of whack thing, not even accounting for Israel, but for the Sunni countries as well, like Saudi Arabia, like Bahrain, like Qatar, all those ones there. That's what's going to make it out of balance, and that's what's going to destabilize the region. It's not Israel is the stabilizing force in the region.
Exactly, and I think President Obama sees it the opposite way. We're out of time. I want to thank Scott Taylor for being with us. Hey, I want to encourage everybody to go to Amazon. You got to read. This is a must-read. It's a great book. It's called Trust Betrayed, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and the Selling Out of America's National Security by former U.S. Navy SEAL. You just heard him, Scott Taylor, Trust Betrayed. Go buy it. Thanks, Scott.